All right, let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about two ancient prophets, Jonah and Micah. Both of them found themselves staring down these massive, overwhelming crises. One was deeply personal, the other was a threat to their entire nation. And these crises, well, they pushed their faith to the absolute limit. So let's start with maybe one of the weirdest stories in the entire Bible. You've got the prophet Jonah. God sends him to this super wicked city, Nineveh, tells him to preach against it. He does. They actually listen, they repent, and God spares them. Awesome, right? Wrong. Jonah's reaction? He gets absolutely furious. It makes no sense. Why on earth would a prophet get mad at God for being merciful? To really get Jonah, we have to look past the surface level story. You know, the one with the big fish. Because underneath all his grumpiness, there's this huge theological problem he's wrestling with. It's a crisis that calls the very nature of God's justice into question. Now, look, the story definitely paints Jonah as being a bit petty. I mean, he literally gets more upset about his shade plant dying than he does about an entire city of people. But his anger isn't just simple selfishness, and it's not just about his ego, like he's worried his prophecy didn't come true. No, no. The real issue here goes way deeper. It's all about justice. You have to try and see it from his point of view. The Ninevites, they weren't just some random city. They were the capital of the Assyrian Empire, a brutal, violent regime that was oppressing his people, Israel. So Jonah's question is actually a really serious one. If God is going to show mercy to them, to Israel's worst enemies, then how can God's people ever trust his promise to set things right? It creates this massive tension between God's incredible mercy and his promise of justice. Okay, so Jonah's crisis was internal, right? A personal wrestling match with God over mercy and justice. Now we're going to pivot to the prophet Micah, who was facing a massive external crisis because those very same enemies weren't a theological problem anymore. They were at the gates, threatening to wipe his country off the map. You really got to understand the world these guys were living in. It's the 8th century BC, and the Assyrian Empire is basically the Death Star of its day, an unstoppable military machine just expanding and gobbling up every smaller nation in its path. In 722 BC, they completely destroy the northern kingdom of Israel. And by 701, that same Assyrian army is parked right outside Jerusalem. This wasn't some far-off threat. It was a 5-alarm fire. And a crisis like this, it really shows you what people are made of, especially leaders. First, you get King Ahaz. He's so terrified of his neighbors that he basically makes a deal with the devil. He asks Assyria for help, and in the process turns his own kingdom, Judah, into a puppet state. But then you have his son, Hezekiah, who does the complete opposite. He decides to rebel against Assyria, putting his trust in God instead of shady political deals. And Hezekiah's faith is immediately put to the ultimate test. The Assyrian king, a guy named Sennacherib, just rolls through Judah. He conquers 46 cities and then surrounds Jerusalem, trapping Hezekiah, as he famously bragged, like a bird in a cage. The Assyrian general is literally standing outside the city walls, yelling taunts, demanding they surrender unconditionally. With his back against the wall and zero military options left, what does Hezekiah do? He takes the threatening letter into the temple, lays it out before God, and just prays. So at this exact moment, you've got two major prophets on the scene in Jerusalem. There's Isaiah. He's the ultimate insider, a trusted advisor in the royal court with the king's ear. And then there's Micah, a preacher from a small country town, a total outsider. But when we look at how history remembers this moment, it's the outsider's voice that really seems to have changed everything. While Isaiah was in the palace counseling the king, Micah was out on the streets, and man, he was not holding back. His message was terrifying and relentless. He flat out warned everyone that because of all the corruption in the nation, Jerusalem itself, the holy city, the center of their world, was going to be completely destroyed. Now get this, the impact of Micah's message was so huge, it was still being talked about 100 years later. In the book of Jeremiah, when Jeremiah himself is on trial for his life for preaching a similar message, the city elders actually defend him by telling this story. And they don't say it was the royal insider Isaiah who saved the day. They say it was the harsh, unfiltered preaching of the outsider Micah that drove King Hezekiah to repent, which in turn led God to save the city. So what was it about Micah's message that made it so powerful it was remembered for a century? Well, the secret isn't just in his warnings of doom and gloom. It's in the beautiful, intentional way his book is structured. It's basically a blueprint for finding hope right in the middle of a disaster. The entire book of Micah works on this simple rhythm. It's like a heartbeat. He lays out this terrifying vision of judgment, exile, destruction, total loss, but right after, without missing a beat, he follows it with this stunning promise of salvation. This isn't just a random mix of bad news and good news, it's a deliberate design. And here's the really amazing part. The salvation he promises is never just some generic, vague, don't worry, things will get better message. It is always a direct and specific reversal of the judgment he just described. So if the judgment is exile and losing your land, the salvation is the promise that the people will be gathered back home. If the judgment is Jerusalem being torn down, the salvation is that Jerusalem will be raised up and exalted above all nations. Mourning is literally turned into rejoicing. Every single loss is precisely undone. The crucial ingredient in this blueprint for hope is this idea of the remnant. Woven into every one of these promises of reversal is this guarantee that a group of survivors, the leftovers, will make it through. It's a powerful concept because it ensures that total, absolute destruction is never the final word. There is always a future, always a foundation for hope, because God promises to always preserve a remnant. So when you put it all together, from Jonah's raw struggle with a God whose mercy seems to defy justice, to Micah's beautiful blueprint where hope is the exact mirror image of despair, these ancient stories give us a really powerful way to think. They suggest that maybe the very nature of our crisis, the specific way we're hurting, actually contains the seeds of our future restoration. It leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What if the hope we're all looking for isn't just an escape from our problems, but their perfect reversal?